This is the E of Real Estate. I'm your host today, and my guest is Michael Chown. Michael Chown is an architecturalist, an environmental designer who lives in North Wales and is a Welshman himself. Last year we met through a mutual friend and exchanged ideas. We decided to have a podcast interview somewhere soon, and today it's all going to happen. Michael, people have an idea of what a environmental designer does, but what is a architecturalist?
It's a word I made up myself, so I'm not expecting anybody to know, but it's and I think I do this all the time. I use references that work for me. And we both followed the whole design pattern of architecture. I trained as an architect with no real intention of working as such, but working with community projects that people can understand. So I have a design skill that I can bring to anything, which is why I tend to refer to myself as an environmental designer. The outside's as important as the inside. The piazza is where people meet. How do we go from there? So I realized I was more interested in the people side of this event than the building side. And there's that great conundrum in architecture. Do people get the buildings they deserve, or buildings get the people they deserve? And it's that kind of hinge point in what leads us to the best benefit for the greatest number. And so the root of the word architecture was the foundation stone for me. Archi of the heaven, ore of the earth, tecton, our ability to build. So architecture means building heaven on earth, nothing less than. And if that's the essence that we're working towards in our design process, and I'm more interested in the people than the buildings to get them involved in the process and take responsibility for it, then I've taken out the build bit and put in the culture bit. So archiculture is a word I've invented for building heavenly culture on earth.
Okay.
Us coming together in the most beautiful ways that we can.
Great explanation. Great. In this podcast, I would like to explore your vision and master plan for a new civilization within Earth's capacity, which you gave me last year. So okay. I read it and I thought, well, so we have to do that. And this master plan you wrote at the end of 2019 as a draft manifest, action plan for a new civilization within Earth's capacity, 7 steps we must achieve by 2030 together. Yeah. And then the unthinkable happened. The world went into a lockdown at the beginning of 2020. For about 3 years, humanity was kept hostage in undemocratic and non-transparent ways. What has happened since the last 5 years? Any updates you can give us?
Yes, the great difference for me was sitting here in a field with no neighbours in beautiful sunshine in early part of 2020 was very much a, what do I want to do? And so I reviewed all those things that I'd been starting 40 to 45 years ago, saying where have they got to? How do we take those forward? So whereas the 2030 plan, if you like, was a set of ideas of those things that each of us must do if we're to generate a society that works for everyone. And I broke that down into 3 essential educations. A moment at which you pause and ask yourself in your heart, am I up for this? Is this really what's going to benefit me and you and everyone else? And then how do we collectively do it? So those 7 steps were, what does ecology bring to us? There's no waste in ecology. There's no profit in ecology. But there are eternal cycles, whether it's the water cycle of rain and river and so forth. So if we take that understanding and say, it flows, it continues, it's always beneficial. Everything is growing, everything is vibrant, and life doesn't stop. Then we look at ethics. Currently, 8 billion people on the planet. Mm-hmm. Some of them are doing rather better than others. What are we doing to share, and what would sharing be like? And then I've always come to this in the past as economics is the third thing, always after ethics and ecology, but economics has been the thing that's fundamentally flawed and has been to the detriment of the other two, human life and landscape, ecology, call it what you will. So those three things we really need to look at. And that produces a Venn diagram, which it is the foundation of a lot of my studies. How do those three things overlap? And out of it, how do you find the empowerment for you, for me, for every child in Africa who hasn't even got fresh water, let alone a decent meal or a roof? And if you agree that this is what we have to do as the fourth step, then we have to sit down together. Then we have to discuss the patterns that evolves that are the same everywhere on Earth, with the same amount of resources or whatever. And what does that lead us through to? And so I tend to model that on what would an ethical Wales look like? What would be the foundation stones of one country saying, we've done it. We're now feeding ourselves, we're clothing ourselves, we're not demanding from the world, but we've set a pattern that says we're all thriving. Then perhaps you pick another country, Sierra Leone or somewhere that hasn't got anything like what we've got, but is on the same scale as Wales, and then say, well, okay, we've reached a point at which we can now give away. It's not going to be, any skin off our nose. We've all got food, we've all got shelter. So what would you like? Do you want expertise? Do you want money? Do you want us to come and build things for you as volunteers to set up a water system? Doesn't matter. And once you've established that kind of, we can all do this together, then you can start almost a community of small nations. So we could twin with Estonia that wants to be organic, or Sikkim who's already there, or all the small countries of the world can begin to say, well, if we can do it, you can do it. And it probably then requires all the greater countries of the world to disaggregate. America to go back into its separate states, and the states to go back to. Very easy in Europe, because all those original kingdoms still exist. Saxony and Savoy and so forth. Italy, France, Germany in particular, and Spain. Very clear where those ancient lines used to be. And it doesn't matter what size they are. The fact that Germany goes from Bavaria down to Bremen, a city-state or a big, it's like, it's finding the level at which people say, this is the bit where I trust the people I can talk to and work with. And so your question was, what's happened since writing that paper 5 or 6, 7 years ago? Because of lockdown. Well, a sort of retrenchment that says, well, if I'm sitting here on my own, and I can't go to Cardiff to change national policy or whatever, then what are the three things that I most want to do? What are those dreams that I've had all my life that I've not yet put into practice? And that boiled down to this little chap here, this little document with 3 levels. What have I called those? The world's first ethical community, the world's first autonomous county, and the world's first complete country. So, looking at the steps that enable you to bring ethics, ecology and economics into the transition of achievement, which means economics is being played down and empowerment's being played up. So we've got those 3 things hidden behind levels of community, county and country, which is what those 3 projects are addressing. And community really boils down to how do you restructure when society has become globalized and everybody nips to the supermarket and so forth, and yet in the whole of this part of Wales the turnips were grown, the pigs ate all the waste, and there were geese walking in the streets. Barley was common on every farm. In fact, if you go back into the historic maps on a Welsh map, it would tell you what was grown in every field. And every farm had a hemp field, and so that the fibres for clothing and so forth, and rope making and so on, were all here. And so the community level, I can use those projects that I've developed in the past of path construction and so forth to become greenways in a very literal sense. So you're planting crab apples and so forth down there. And once you arrive at a village, you're creating allotments down the side of the path. Then you're getting the corner shop going. That becomes a produce exchange for those farmers who are already there doing their part in that process. So
actually, when I may interrupt you, what I hear you saying, I think I hear you saying that we went into globalization since the Industrial Revolution. So about 100, 150 years, something like that. Yeah. And we came at a point that we say, well, actually, probably we went in a wrong direction, although some people acknowledge that. And lockdown was actually, I think, a really blessing in disguise to me. And you are saying a similar thing, that people say, oh, wait a minute, let's pause and let's rethink, what are we heading at? Is this really what we want? And you came up with this idea of, practice what you preach and do it in your own backyard here in Wales, North Wales.
I know how to do it. I can go out and build these rooms. And you know that we've reached that moment of saying, let's knuckle down and do it ourselves. Because when you hear WEF, the World Economic Forum, saying that globalization's come to an end, you know that kind of expansive, limitless growth is over. Mm-hmm. And so we're going from the perceptions of infinite to the reality of a finite planet. And the finite planet is one that can be resource shared in a way that everybody thrives. Mm-hmm. And that's the missing ingredient. Very few people seem to understand that the resource base on this planet is enormous, but it's been mismanaged.
Yes.
And the idea that you can just go out and buy whatever you want, whenever you want, because it's come from some other country, where you have no responsibility for who is involved and what environmental damage is involved or what pollution was caused in getting it to you. And it's all wrapped up in plastic and it's been driven by diesel trucks for miles. So you get the average supermarket good travelling 1,000 miles. When everything that had to be eaten in the Llŷn Peninsula where we are now was grown in the Llŷn Peninsula. Mm-hmm. So we've lost understandings, we've lost relationship with neighbours, we've lost all sorts of things. And so, as you say, lockdown, with no traffic in the street, the kids out playing, you talking to your neighbour and so forth, all sorts of beautiful things began to happen.
Yes.
And the question is, how can we capture that and turn it forwards? And this was my first step, the Greenway idea, that means that everybody would understand that that's of benefit to them. So it's the most simplistic project that you can put out there that no one's going to say no to. Yes. And I've been building cycle routes for 40 years and nobody says no to them. Mm-hmm. When I stopped doing it, it's probably truer to say I was doing it 40 years ago. It's one of those things that's just beautiful for everybody, it's free for everybody, and it enables you to meet at a pace or listen to the trickling of the river or whatever. But that's just the first of those 3 projects. And the second one is the longest standing dream I've personally had, and it comes from that architectural background of what is community when you bring all the issues together. And so it's something that I call the world's first ethical village. And it's based on a principle of the planetary capacity spread amongst the planetary population. And I'm sure we'll come back to this. It boils down to 1 acre each. Mm. And there's an interesting balance there that says that at the moment we're using 10 times that in the West. And yet we can thrive on 1/10 of that. So an acre is not making us disadvantaged. It's actually giving us more than we need. But it's the level at which I and the child in Africa can have exactly the same resource base, and we can both thrive. And getting that message across is probably the most difficult, interesting, and psychologically challenging at this moment, because that means everybody. So Western civilization has taken us to a point at which certain technologies, certainly communication, so forth, enables us to say, yeah, now we can all do it. That's a very beautiful moment. So to get out of this, oh my God, I've got to get in the car and go to work and pay the mortgage, into, if I just relax a bit, there's enough.
Well, actually, I think we have now this whole COVID thing created a momentum in a positive way. That what I understand, several big corporations have difficulties getting their people back into the office. They're trying all tricks to bring them back, make it more, how we say, appealing to come, or even just order. You have to come otherwise leave. Yeah. So people tasted something in these 2-3 years that somehow we were not forgotten. Yeah. We had not forgotten that that is how we lived just 100 years ago. Yeah. Yeah. And luckily we came to this point now. I think that more and more people are seeing this. So that's why I'm so excited, and I wanted to interview you about your master plan and here in North Wales, because I'm really impressed by how the people here take care of themselves. The air ambulance is just almost 100% financed by the people, by money, besides the taxes they also have to pay. So I think it has a really big chance of success, what you are talking about. So it's just the steps to take people along. I think so cycle route would be one, the first step. That's what I hear you saying.
First of those three, when I sat down, you see, the most important to me is the ethical village. That's the model for the world. If you can show that 1,000 people can live on 1,000 acres and do it spectacularly, they're all creative, they're all living well within their means, so there is no transport, there's no packaging, there's no, you've cut all the unnecessary aspects of Western civilization away, and they just don't exist anymore. And if you're really serious about that, then you don't need currency either. There's so many levels at which that begins to work.
I think I agree. In the long run, this, some will call it utopia, but it is realistic. I think you can reach that. But the point is how to get from this point to that point B over there.
Okay.
And so, people will not overnight say, oh, you know what, I stop working, I do gardening and cycling, and I help my neighbor and do this and that, because they still have to pay the mortgage and pay bills, other bills. Yeah. So how do you envision that transition period?
Okay, that's really one of the reasons why I put 3 projects forwards rather than 1. So the greenway idea, the edible greenway, is something that everybody can engage. It's not on their land, it's something that's set up through community, it's something that's completely free for everybody to use, but it means that there's a base of economic benefit. Now, whether that's a produce shop and a farm, whether it's a bunk barn conversion, whether you're taking people through into, so you're putting economy back into the rural, you're putting money back into the rural economy. So the second phase of doing the ethical village has got to be for those people who already know that that's what they want to do. It's not about changing minds and saying, you've got to do this. It's about setting up a model. And the third one is really just an eye-opener. And the third proposal was to rebuild the Bangor Carnarvon Railway. And this is a case of saying, in your county, there must be something that is absolutely essential to the structure of that county. It may be a hospital, it may be an arts theatre or something. You know that you've been suffering because you haven't had, for so many years, Powys, wonderful case, hardly anything happens there because it's so rurally dispersed. So the people of Powys will say, why doesn't anybody ever do this? The question is, what is that thing in your place? So here, it's the Bangor Carnarvon Railway. That generates a railway circuit of Snowdon, which means you can then reduce the traffic because you've got an alternative means of transport. It's enormously strategically important for planning in this area, but the National Park can't do it because the railway's outside the National Park. They can only do traffic management inside, and nobody outside will do it for the park because they're not the park. It's like, well, what is the overview? And the beauty to me is that it's beyond most people's understanding of what they might personally be involved in. So I'm saying, in the same way that we were looking just now at the participation in that process that began as soon as lockdown began, I can do a little bit of this, I can grow a tomato, I really enjoy doing it. So when you get involved in that train of thought, you cease to be a consumer from you know not where, and you become a producer who understands what you're doing right in front of you. And the question is, how far can you take that? Could you be a producer of your own railway? So can we make it out of hemp? Yes. Can we grow the hemp locally to make the railway carriages? Yes. Now, the amazing thing for us here is that the Welsh Highland Railway has just rebuilt itself as a voluntary organisation.
Okay.
And by doing it as a voluntary organisation, they cut the costs down from £24 million a kilometre to £1 million a mile. 1/50th of the cost. You know? So if you carry on like that and you have a local construction problem that uses the engineering knowledge from the Welsh Highland, you carry that into Bangor, you're building a small-scale train that serves the purpose. It can be a 2-foot gauge hydrogen commuter tram, which is why I've illustrated that here in that little proposal, and that's based on an Austrian railway, which has done exactly the same. So using the best examples around the world to put something in front of us, it says we can do this. And then it becomes a local ownership company. And then you never buy a ticket, you only ever buy a share. So that if you want to commute into Bangor every day, you have a regular season ticket, you're spending more on the railway than anyone else, you get a bigger dividend, becomes your railway.
For some it probably sounds like utopia, but for me living here a large part of the year in this area, I think it's very well feasible, because I have seen, as I called, reminded you just about air ambulance, people here funded and exploiting several helicopters.
Yeah.
And I think there are 7 million each or 10 million, I don't know, there was a lot of millions actually. Yes. And they keep on doing that. Yeah. So the spirit is there, the money obviously also. Yeah. The only thing...
It's a very good comparison, which I hadn't thought about, because 8 miles of railway line you can build for £8 million. The Welsh Highland is not only building its own coaches, it's now building its own steam locomotives. So this year they brought out a brand new Garrett. This is an enormous steam locomotive. Last year they built a brand new Fairley. This is not restoration of old steam engines. They're building brand new ones.
Okay.
And they're doing it here. So that idea then leads on to, would we build our own helicopters? Well, perhaps not. But another project I'm now involved in is looking at the navigation of the River Conway. And because of the silting of the river and the mud flats at low tides, the only vehicle that will do the job is a hovercraft. So into that conversation, we now bring the idea, can we make our own hovercrafts? Can we make them out of hemp? Yes, we can. Can we make them using the hydrogen that's now being generated, the green hydrogen that's coming forward on Anglesey, because it's using turbines in the ocean to generate the electricity, to generate the hydrogen? Yes, you can have a hydroelectric hovercraft, but hydrogen can be made from water by splitting it. So you've got a machine that's running on water, generating its own power to generate, that's been built by local people, yes. So it's about saying, what are the things that we can put in front of ourselves that we say we can do that, And when we do it, the multiplier effect means that the economy is just getting bigger and bigger and bigger.
Yeah.
Now, rural economies have been asset stripped, as third world economies have been asset stripped by the great power centres of the world, London and New York and so forth. If you start reclaiming your intention, then your responsibility, then you show people that, we can. So you can start with simple things like growing potatoes, tomatoes on your windowsill.
Exactly.
But you can, where do you stop? You don't.
Yeah.
Then you get to the point of the third stage in this, complete country. So you could say, and the rule of thumb that I go through is that within a sort of family environment, you might say that on average we can do 40% of everything we need to do. We can grow a little bit, we can mend our own bicycles, we can, all these things are easy and they're fun. And within a community, we might add another 30%, so that you can fix motorbikes, but I can fix bicycles, so we can, between us, we can get all these things done within our community, as it used to. And then you're saying, well, there are certain things we can't do, like run a hospital. Well, that's done by county. And almost every county in Wales has got a hospital, and it's run locally. So we know that we can progress to those kind. And then universities. There's now a university department in almost every county in Wales. So there are those county levels, and then there's very few things that you say are left. So if you've got 40% in the family, another 30% in the community, 20% of the things you can't do in community are done by county, you've only got 10% left. So airport, or, international harbour or something that's done at a national level, and then nothing. That adds up to 100%. What do you need the rest of the world for? If you can feed yourself, clothe yourself, and so it's playing that game like you do with 1,000 people on 1,000 acres. Say there's a model at that scale. What would the model be for a country that is self-determining, self-producing, and so forth, and can set the precedent so other people can then say, well, why aren't we doing that?
Yeah, what I like is that your ideas start very basic, grassroots level.
Bucket of gravel,
because
build a path.
Because yeah, exactly. Because there it has to start. Because then the majority lives on that level.
Yes.
Anyway, and involved. And there is one saying of famous architect Buckminster Fuller. Don't try to fight an existing system, build a new one, then the old one becomes obsolete. So yes. I think that's what you are proposing.
It's exactly the kind of principle that's behind it.
Yeah.
And, you know, I came out of architecture college thinking it's all great fun. I just spent 7 years doing exactly what I want to do and sitting for weeks in Rome and sketching Paris and seeing how these beautiful spaces work that people enjoy so much. But how do they enjoy the process of having made them? And that, you know, if you took the iconography, all the difficult bits of architecture away, and all the waterproofing away, and yet what do you get back to at a level which everybody says, I can do that?
Yes. Because when you are a boy, you can build a tree hut.
Yeah.
Tree house.
You can.
But when you get older and you become CEO of a big company, you cannot build an office anymore. But actually, there's not that much difference functionality-wise.
Yes, we know that.
Yeah.
But most people out in the street are told they can't. And so I want to go out telling people they can.
Yeah, of course.
And the level at which I decided everybody could engage was a bucket of gravel. And that's why I started building cycle routes. Then when you realise that children are getting squashed under trucks in this country because we don't have a law for bicycles, they're vehicles. So a 3-year-old on the road is driving a vehicle. They're not allowed to be on the pavement. Now, obviously, with your Dutch history, you don't have that problem.
That is strange to me.
In Holland, the bicycle is an entity in law.
Yes.
Therefore, it has its own legal system. Therefore, it has its own department. Therefore, it gets its own budget. Therefore, you get good cycle routes.
Yes.
We don't.
Okay.
So we started Sustrans 44 years ago to start building those paths to give children a safe opportunity away from traffic, off into the countryside. And the easy place to start was disused railway lines. So we started with buckets of gravel, and we got children to make them, first of all. The very first routes that we built. I remember the days when one child would hold the spade up, another one would jump on it, and you could take the turf off to go round the side of a housing estate so that they could get to school without going out the front and on the road. They could go round the back and through the...
Yeah, I like that idea. That reminds me of when I was studying in Delft architecture. There was one new neighborhood built, but they didn't make the pavement routes, the walking path. They didn't make that in the beginning. They just waited until people found their optimum tracks, and then they paved it.
Yeah.
So that's actually what I hear you saying, a similar thing. That.
But if you've got a department and if you've got a budget, then it quickly becomes institutionalised. So what we did in Sustrans was which was sustainable transport, as we call it, first of all, we built with gravel, because everybody can build with gravel. Local authorities began to get in and jump on this bandwagon. They then do them in tarmac, because they think it's maintenance free. Then a tree grows its root and the tarmac cracks and it doesn't get maintained and so forth. But the single most important issue that is not considered by agencies is that people can't then do it themselves.
Exactly.
They've taken away that responsibility.
Yeah.
So we worked with children, and so one of the projects I'm working on now, we've got all the schools in Daniolen to be enabled to grow vegetables at school.
Great.
Now we've got it into the secondary school. It happened last year. Over Christmas, it's gone onto the curriculum. They're now teaming up with the biggest vegetable production team in that area. I now want to build a cycle route between the secondary school and so those kids can cycle, have their afternoon vegetable growing, back to school. You know, it's probably on one of the... Oh, here it is. Look at this. There's the school and there's the vegetable production.
Right.
And this is a route that I built 40 years ago So we're now looking at the extension of it.
Exactly, and it's all connected.
So that's wonderful, and that's at that scale at which the children in the school are saying, we want to see this happen. We want to do that.
I think in doing it that way, you bring also the knowledge via the children into the family home.
Yes. I dropped a hint that they might then be doing a harvest festival for their parents.
Yes.
Cooking dinner in the autumn for what they've produced. There's all sorts. And
it's not that strange that they give also a performance on stage when they did their drama or whatever, singing lessons. Why not cook something? Yeah.
Okay, now this is the beauty of the future as I see it, and it's not prevalent today. One of the thing I felt I came up against when I first started was that society had specialised and therefore it is segregated.
Yes.
So you get to the point where the cancer specialist is the only person who can say what this hospital needs and how many millions it's going to cost, because he says, you don't know, I do.
Yeah.
And it's the same with the military, it's the same with motorway builders. They've gone off into a world of their own. Yeah. Whereas the community route is that place where you walk the dog, where you pick the crab apples, where you listen to the river, where you go fishing, where you meet your friends.
Exactly.
There's no edge that says you can't do that.
I think you hit now a very important point, because the same thing happened in architecture. Architecture used to be that person that oversees everything, even is able to make it himself. Long ago. But we lost that because we split it up in all different sections, and nobody has the overview anymore. Except maybe who are trained as architects and are willing to do so. So that brings me to the question that the manifest where we started off with, it says on it, is written, drawn and published by holism. What is that? Because that sounds to me like holistic and whole.
It's the same principle. You see, having trained as an architect, I said, okay, I'm not going to design for anybody until I know how to do it. So I've rebuilt 7 or 8 houses from scratch. And I've done reinforced foundations. I put chimney pots up. I've built chimneys into timber-framed houses and so on. So I've built staircases inside kitchen cupboards, and so I do all the plumbing. I do all the wiring. I do good, so to find out what that world is that you and I both understand. But when you look at the psychology and the metaphysics and the, it's like that doesn't apply to the person who's growing parsnips. There's a different set of values. So what is the picture that we're all looking at? And what is the table on which we put everything so that we can say it's not? And my first sort of image of society and the way it's gone was the leaves of a turnip. It's kind of, here's planet Earth, but there's a great shoot of green going off in different directions. So, the military and governments in particular just go off and do their own thing. It's not relevant to the individual. And then you have to go back to an extraordinary basic level, which is only person and planet. The only place at which it all comes together is the totality of the planet, and the only place in which I can understand that is inside me.
Exactly.
It's everything else is human construct, social construct. It doesn't matter whether it's an agency, whether it's the World Bank, whether it's your community council. It's something we've invented to be a step in the process. You put more steps in, it gets so far away that people don't understand how it works.
Exactly.
Globalization has done that. It's taken everything away to a point at which we don't understand how it works. And I need to know. I've got children. I want to know what their education is about. I have health issues, and so do my family. And, so there is a point at which every one of us wants a finger on every one of those things because they're important to us.
It went so far apart that I think many people consider themselves as a victim of the system. Actually, they are master of it, because you can change it anyway. It's just a construct, as you said. We can change. If enough people say, no, it's enough, we do it in a different way.
That's the point that we're after. At what point do we re-empower people to say, yes, I can do this? Now, when I started the greenhouse in Bangor, because coming out of architecture, I'm asking myself, what are the 2 things that, or rather, I could only see 2 things that I brought with me. One was the bucket of gravel, if you take that whole design process down to a point at which you and I can talk about it, we can go and do something about it, you build a footpath. Then you can talk about building a bench or a bridge. Or, then you can have people going home excited. Yeah, I did that.
Yes.
It's it didn't take long, but we've turned that tree into... So I used to take the lads on cycle route construction, and girls, down to the forest in Bethgelert. We'd choose our trees. We'd get them felled. We'd take them to the mill. We'd get them planked. We'd take them back to our workshop. We'd turn them into gates and fences and things so that they could say, yeah, I've seen it happen. We did that. But the answer to your question is the other side of what I took from architecture, which I understood to be root, node and focus. The aspects that when you overlay them form the fixed point on which something can begin. So I started 3 projects to replicate those kinds of things. It's more applicable in town planning than it is in architecture perhaps, but root, node and focus is about the piazza, it's about the pathway, it's about the building that's in the piazza. So I started Gwynedd Grassroots, Gwynedd Grapevine, Gwynedd Greenhouse. And grassroots, we've been talking about these root constructions, which here we call...
Maybe you should, whenever I interrupt, explain a little bit about greenhouse. It is not a greenhouse to grow vegetables, but that's you mean something else with it, eh?
No, it's a name that came from 6 different directions at once, and they all collided. Because I went to talk to the economic development officer in the county, and I said, what's the lowest level at which you can support community growth endeavours, whatever? And he said, we have lots of nursery units. I said, you mean those boxes on industrial estates where you've got to prove 3 years accounts before you can use them, and you can only use them for the use that's specified those? He said, yes. I said, what about people who've got an idea about running a creche or something? And he was just blank. So greenhouse comes from growing seeds. So and that's the things that community dream about, anybody dreams about, that they can't get started and so on. So can you make a place where people and projects can grow? So that, and that's in architectural terms, we're talking about the least amount of building, the least structure that says we're not wasting time on what the building's like. We're putting our energy into the warmth, the light, and what I didn't understand until I actually went ahead and did this was the cross-fertilization that you generate. If you've got 12 different people who all want to run, one wants to run street-level theatre, one wants to run a women's group, and those pioneers, those dynamic forces, they're all under the same roof, doing completely different things, but that's where they get their best support.
Exactly.
Not from the 12 people they're trying to encourage to come out on the street and do what they're doing, but the fact that they've got somewhere to meet equally enthusiastic people in animal rights, in the food cooperative and so on. So we had all these things under one roof, and I had my cycle route construction, somebody else had a tree planting scheme, and that was a tremendous moment in growing people through growing projects and so forth.
Exactly.
Yeah, and so that was the sort of the birth of my knowledge that we can do these things very simply. Bought that building for £14,000 and went through the 3-year process that you have to turn it into a limited company with a business, because then we could prove that the rent had been paid for 3 years, and it was very easy. But enabling those sort of steps to move forwards, tremendous. And so the enormous hotel that a group of us bought in town last year, very much in terms of what you're saying about the air ambulance, local people will get together to support something when you say, look, this and this does that, benefits everybody.
Exactly, yeah.
And we raised £500,000 in 5 weeks and bought it outright. No agency grants or anything. They couldn't move fast enough.
Great.
The community did. And I don't think that would have happened pre-lockdown. Something has changed that says the local authority is not supporting us. We're on the right,
Exactly.
So, yes, there's a kind of infiltration of good news somewhere through the sort of veins of society that is enabling at the moment. It's exciting, but it's not obvious.
Yeah, I think powers in place don't like to change. When you are in charge, why would you like to change? Because it brings you some benefits. So owning the media, it will be suppressed in the mainstream media. So I hope videos like this, the interviews like this, will encourage people to say, hey, wait a minute, when they can do it, maybe we can do it also, or do it a little bit different. So yes, I agree fully with you that the power is indeed with the people, because we are in the majority anyway.
I think there's a very interesting step though between this transition that's happening, whatever it is, that is engaging everybody a little bit, and those bigger sort of carrots that we might wave and say, you know, let's build a railway together, and the gulf between, and also the difference that might be encountered in a different country, a different county, you know, a different group of people, different social values and so on. So the great question for me is, what is the pattern behind all this that says that will work for everybody? And that was the sort of basis of the 7 steps we talked about before. And it's much more prevalent in the 7 stages that society might be going through at the moment.
Maybe you can elaborate a little bit about that, these 7 stages.
7 stages. We've had a society that has, in its sort of direction, has been unchanged for thousands of years. Birth of agriculture, 12,500 years ago, right through Roman Empire, British Empire, the great American dream of, you know, enormous motor cars, and something's happening at the moment that says that's gone as far as it's going to go. And after that comes something that goes in a completely different direction. Now, we can symbolically see this as the age of Pisces and the age of Aquarius. Pisces is literally hierarchical, one fish above another. It's literally dualistic. There are 2 fish, not a shoal. It's literally polarized. They're going in opposite directions. You know, everything about it says it's now not what we want to do. And Aquarius says equal water for everybody. The water pourer is enabling the irrigation system to work so that everybody, so being specific, 8 billion people get an equal slice of the cake. And that's an enormous psychological difference. You know, you've climbed up this, and it's been hard work. People have been fighting to get. But once you know that you've got a view, it's amazing. It's absolutely extraordinary. And yet, the obsession with keeping going is stopping people from looking around and going, oh my God, we don't have to go anywhere.
Well, there is one way out. It reminds me, it was Stephen Covey, I think he came up with, you can very strategically climb a ladder to find out that when you are on the top of the ladder, oh my God, it was leaning against the wrong wall. And I think that is actually what is happening now, that some of us are already at the top of that ladder, say, oh my God, what were we doing? And some are still climbing.
I actually say in the 7 Steps document that dam that we've been, you know, the water levels of the world have been rising against, it's getting thinner and thinner and thinner and thinner. You get to the point where there's a whole group of people saying, oh, we've got to build the dam because the water level's rising. Another group saying, it's got so thin, it's falling to pieces, we've got to take it down. And you know, when the concentration is on where did growth go and how do we make more money, and, you know, you're not looking at the view.
Yes.
And the view has been there since 1960s. The hippies had it. That sort of, you can go out and educate your own children, build your own house. We've reached a moment of being civilized that says we can all help each other. We all understand abundance. And it's got a lot to do with world communication. We can now talk to each other everywhere. And yet, the momentum of the old one has stopped the new one. And in 1962, we had Rachel Carson telling us that there was DDT in Antarctica. You know, our pollution levels have gone away. There was JFK saying there is a military-industrial machine which is running the world. I'm not. You know, it's time that we stopped and thought about it. There are all kinds of organisations like Fintorn who's saying that back to a spiritual understanding of who we are and what really matters inside us. is far more important than what's happening outside it. You know, all these things happened in 1962. It's an extraordinary build-up. It's almost as though somebody laid out the brief and said, it's here if you want to read it, and hardly anybody read it.
Yeah.
So it's taken us a long, long time to get to this current moment where it's beginning to happen so fast. I always thought that vegetables would be the thing that tipped the balance. When people start growing their own and they realise it's a beautiful thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
It's a better nutritional thing to do. It's something you can take your children and you can pass on, you know. Now we've got so close to a moment of critical change, vast change, that the only way to solve it is probably to put £50,000 in everybody's pocket. So you don't have to go to work tomorrow. You can make your own choice about what, you know. So we don't know what's going to happen in the next couple of years, but it's very difficult to say it's not going to happen.
I also agree. There will something will happen. I don't know what, but something will happen that will create a shift. Yeah.
So I still haven't answered the question on holism with a W.
Yeah, great.
So back in the greenhouse, we're looking at all the variety under one roof of all the things that we could do to change, all the things that each of us individually wanted to do to help the world around us. And it was vast and varied. But what I noticed was that half the people who wanted to be under that roof, because they wanted to get on the job and not waste money on renting their own offices, were people like the healers and the masseurs and the yoga teachers and the meditators. So there were a whole group of people who were looking at inner growth, you know, recreating self. And then there were the tree planters and the animal rights and my cycle reconstruction and all those kinds of, it's out there in the world, kind of, we need to make a better place for people.
Mm-hmm.
And it struck me that everybody was using this word holism. They're saying we're making a more holistic world. Yeah. And they're spelling it the English way, Holism, holism. And I just thought, well, if the root word of holism is holy, and the spiritual people are saying it's going on inside me, and there's something inside me that says, I know the difference between good and evil. I know that, you know, there's something here that is not prevalent in society, but it's really important. And I'm looking at the ways in which we can do that without talking about it, like going out and building a cycle route, because it's pleasant for everybody. It's about moving with the river and not moving with the motor car and all those sorts of things that just say, I can make life easier for you without you, you know, I'm going to sit down and convince you first. Those people, our lot on our side of the fence, we're still using the word holism. The National Trust, we're using holism, as you know. And I just thought, one lot is seeking holiness with an H. The other lot is seeking the integration of the whole with a W. Mm-hmm. So why don't we make this clear and call that holism with a W? So again, it's another of those words I seem to have invented. I know that in America, they only use W. Mm-hmm. Over here, we only use H, but it's about time we said that there's an inner outwards radiance and there's an outer inwards understanding, and we need both.
Exactly.
Yeah? The outward is infinite. There's no end to what you radiate when you're in love and so forth.
Yeah, exactly.
And there's no... but there is a very definite limit to the size of the planet and its capacity and how many people and what we can do together. So that's finite. And it's pointing back at us. This is infinite.
Yeah, actually, I hear when you're talking now without that we actually discussed it about my theme, the inner and outer environment. It is not one or the other, it is both. And both are influencing each other. Yes. If you like it or not, it is still going on. So everybody has the experience that in some buildings you say, oh my God, awful, where can I get out as quick as possible? Yep. Or you get, Zen, or whatever they say.
Yes.
So there is something that building does to people.
Yeah.
But it's also vice versa.
Yeah. It's an endless...
because we create them. What was the Churchill saying again? First we create buildings and then they create us. Because there is a direct influence how you feel when you're in a building. As I say sometimes, it's like walking in an instrument while it is being played. So all these vibrations of that violin you are walking in is influencing you, because also that experience we have, when you listen to music, it can get you. You can fall in love, you can get really wild, exotic, wild. You can even be very quiet and sit in the corner and meditate, and all other emotions that are thinkable of. So yes, I think the understanding that we have to come to is that it is the inner being, inner environment as I call it, and the outer environment. And it is one thing actually, it is one coin, both sides of the same coin actually. And so that's what I like a lot about your approach, that making people aware that there are no victims. There are no victims. They are told they are victims, or believe him, or follow him, or do this, or don't do that. But actually we are masters, we can create it ourselves.
If we're going to have a new society, it's one in which everyone is empowered to their own creativity, and they know that's theirs. There's nobody to stop you. That was one of the beauties of Greenhouse, that if you walked in there with the intention of doing something useful, you became the owner of the building. Now, weeks after opening, somebody from the United Nations was over from New York, and he said, "Where did that come from?" I said, "Where did it not come from? Why would it not be like that?" And he said, "But nobody's done that for thousands of years. You're talking about the foundation of Greece, and even then they had slaves and so forth, so it wasn't the same. Now I'm saying that there is no reason for you not to be the owner of this building. So you walk through the door, nobody's going to stop you being on the committee. In law you have to have a treasurer and a secretary, but you don't have to have a chairperson. You didn't have one. So you come together as equals. You discuss what needs to be done and how can we benefit your project. Women's group walk in and say, all our energy must go to the women we're supporting. We're not paying rent. Okay, don't. That's your choice, So those of us who had government grants to run our schemes just paid 50p more, It all balanced out because we were doing what mattered to us. It's that level of self-empowerment, creativity, intention. That's us, So, if you like, I've had experience of that in action. And it was deemed to be incredibly curious at the time, but I don't see why we're not replicating it.
Well, maybe it needs a little new push and put some new logs on the fire that starts burning again. So, as I said already a few times, that I really like your vision, and it is also confined to a region that you can understand. It is not world scale to start with, so you can involve locals. You said already that the first step is to involve the local people here, so with the cycle routes. Is there anything more that you are thinking of already practicing, but to involve people, local people?
Locally?
So the green route you are explaining, maybe you explain that a little bit, because that is also a very interesting idea, to make a green corridor and connecting areas. And make that green corridor not just a green corridor because it is green and nature, but also make it edible food and all the other things you can do there.
Again, it's one of those, I don't see why not. And there are certain forces that have been at work in the world for a very long time that won't be for much longer. So if you look at all the projections for traffic, you realise that it's not getting bigger, it's getting smaller. People who live in cities don't want cars anymore. And even though there are impositions to stop them using cars, people stopped using cars before the impositions came out. And you think, well, as long as you can see what the real trends are. And one of the extraordinary things, we have a problem at the moment with the Sustainable Farming Act in Wales, which is telling farmers that 10% of their land has got to be tree cover, 10% has got to be wilderness, they've got to have buffer zones against rivers so that the cattle can't get to and contaminate the waters or whatever. So all of these things are seen as a control that reduces their capacity to produce.
Yes.
The thing that's really affecting their capacity is the price they're being offered by the supermarkets. It's nothing to do with the control. But if you look at the scale of world agriculture, almost 80% of it is machine-based, monocultural, and only produces 20% of our food. Now, we were told that was a green revolution, but in truth, it's an enormously detrimental process that is just wrecking the ecology. 80% of the world's food is produced on 20% of the land. So 80 to 20 and 20 to 80. The small farmers are 16 times more productive than the big ones on the whole range, on everything. Yeah, the small farms have pigs and cattle and everything else. It's not just. But if you went vegetarian, you'd be 96 times more productive than the big farmers. So there's an extraordinary, piece of misinformation, call it a lie if you will, about what is putting food on the table.
Well, I would call it smart marketing from the corporations. That's what it all is. So you had Brexit, so you stepped out of the EU. When I talked to several people, they say, "Oh, that was the worst thing they ever could do." I said, "Why?" Because it gives you a challenge, because you can take care of yourself. You have 66 million people or something in that area. You have a very nice countryside, the whole UK. Why can't you create your own food? You are not dependent at all. Yeah, when you want to have oranges, of course. Okay, I understand that. Or bananas.
During the last war, the allotment level in Britain went up something like 7-fold. But the surveys that were done on how we were going to feed ourselves illustrated that the Clean Peninsula, where we are now, is the finest place in Britain to grow vegetables. No vegetables are grown here.
Yeah, that's what.
Because the grants are all encouraging sheep and cattle. So the pigs are gone, the barley's gone, the turnips are gone. But I was just going through a process of going from the Sigurd question that you asked into agriculture to come back through transport to get to the point at which the space for the greenway is provided. Because at the moment there's a presumption that agricultural land is under pressure. And we haven't got enough of it. But if you understand that we only need 1/100th of it to feed ourselves, 3 million people in Wales can feed themselves on 150,000 acres. That's 4,850,000 acres that are not needed to feed Wales. You get a world food collapse. Wales is not feeding anybody but Wales because there is no export. Now that's an extraordinary difference in the position. And when you've localised, you don't need transport. So I'm building the infrastructure for a future transport system, which is bikes and trains, but it requires the reduction in agriculture to enable the land so that those lovely greenways that wander through the countryside.
I love this. I love this analogy, because the same they did with the fiber optic cables to and speed up the rate that you can use your internet. To facilitate new businesses. The same is with infrastructure, roads. When they built the railroad 150 years ago or whatever it was here in this part of the UK, the whole coastline became developed because of that. All of a sudden tourists could come in and goods come out and in. And so building a green infrastructure, I think, is a fantastic idea, and especially when there's edible food along, and recreation and connection and whatever you have, and it is not that much costly actually, because you have a plan that you use existing parts, that's just planting them and and helping people to see the potential.
I build 100 miles of these, and I know that I can build them for £100,000 a mile, and current local authority and government structures are looking at millions of pounds a mile. And it's the same problem as, current railway reconstruction is £24 million a kilometre. Reconstruction, not new. You start looking at HS2 or whatever it is, you're in a very different league. But reconstructing railways, £24 million a mile, kilometre. And the Welsh Island, self-build, lightweight. If you go to light transport and very light transport, different ball game again. You can then use slab track, which means you don't have to move the surfaces, and so it all. When you take control and say, this is what we want, this is what we can do, this is what's going to serve us. And so I've been giving you an answer about agriculture through transport, because I believe in this complete integration of everything where it's all the same thing. And if you localize, it's all back where you can see it. So yes, you can walk and cycle to all the things that you need on a daily basis, and you can communicate, because we now have worldwide technologies which aren't going to disappear overnight, even if they hiccup and we get solar flares next year which wipe them out for a few months. We've reached a point, and one of the ways in which I like to see myself understanding this is that in this part of the world you can look at the outcome of our understanding of a druidic culture thousands of years ago, but you can't see any evidence of them having been here.
Yeah,
yes.
Besides some big stones in the field.
They are probably not druidic.
I agree with you.
They're not the people who lived in the woods, and there's no real structural evidence of what they were doing 2,000 years ago. There's buildings all over the world that are 2,000 years old. They were here then. Then we've got a medieval period all over the Western Hemisphere where we know that the saddler and the candle maker and the everything was done in the community. The market town had it all. You wouldn't dream of going beyond your local encompass because all those crafts were there. I mean, I actually remember people making shoes in this part of the world. I remember the barley being hand stooped and so forth. This is all within one generation. Now we've got a digital communication. You put those three layers together to say there's no damage to the environment. We can live in it, around it. There's availability of everything. If we know that we're the people who are doing it. And we've got a world understanding that says, if there's a tsunami over there, we know who to help. We don't need to build up enormous resources. We can simply move quickly because of the speed of modern communication and so forth. If you put those three together in the same place, then you've not got utopia. You've got, this is the difference. When Thomas More wrote Utopia with a U, he understood the Greek that says that means nowhere. So when William Morris starts his News from Nowhere, he's doing a play on utopia, which says, if you criticize me on how beautiful this world is that I'm putting forwards, then, no, it doesn't exist. It's nowhere. Whereas E-utopia, like Europe, E-utopia means the very positive best that we can do. So there's a utopia and a utopia, like there is a holism and a holism. And I'm absolutely with you. It's when we bring these things back together and say we're making one, but we've understood. And it's the move from identifying the idea, going through the discussion of the dualities, forming a concrete decision about what to do, and then taking an action. So these things all happen 1, 2, 3, 4. And it intrigues me, and part of the aspect of the 7 stages and the 7 steps is that everything on this planet happens in a series of 7s. You can't get away from it. When you arrived, I said tea or coffee. First you want a drink. Tea or coffee. You've gone from individual to duality. We've discussed the alternatives. And then we said, you said you'd have a tea. I said I'd have a coffee. So we've got a decision made. So I said, I'll put the kettle on. We've got an action in the 4th place. Then, did you like your tea? Would you want another one? Do you want some sugar in it? All those permutations that are the choices we make after the action, not before. Choice always comes after. And then, it's in my case, I'm a coffee drinker. We have pattern. That means my next drink is probably going to be a coffee because I've established. And then, do you want some rum in it? There are little varieties that come that tweak the basic pattern. So we're going from 1 to 7. And then we go back to the beginning, starting again. I wish I'd had tea. You're starting again with a different process. Or, it's gone 6 o'clock. Can't we have something a bit stronger? So those things happen in every aspect in life on this planet. And it fascinates me that the word earth adds up to 7. And earth and heart, the person planet, are anagrams of the same word that adds up to 7. There is a limit on the finite nature of what you can achieve in physical form. 8 is infinity. It's not on the planet. It's in our intellectual realms. And 9 is a completion in the spiritual cycle. So these things happen off planet or metaphysically. So there's a 1 to 7-ness, and that is what determines the number of steps that we go through to completion. And that's why that first document was written as the 7 steps to completion, because anything else takes us back to redo something.
Yeah, I like to what you said a minute ago about opposites, dualism, and that you have two things, and maybe when you bring the two things together, you create something new, a third thing. So you have a triangle or the trinity, as you have, I see over there, creating strategy.
This one?
Yeah.
the overlap of ethics, ecology and empowerment.
So it is actually, it is not one or the other, it is putting the opposites together and creating something new. So it is not the old system or utopia, whatever way you write it. It is bringing them both together, because it is not overnight, throw that away and we take something new. It will be for a time together, and then we make a choice somewhere.
Was it Plato who said, if you have two equally powerful forces, the truth will lie between? So you've generated that third thing. Exactly.
Oh, just like male and female, there's a child coming out of that when there is real love. Actually, so something new coming out of it. And so I think that's what we are talking about. So we had a little bit, 2020 seems to be a really important moment in time, because something really shifted, and we are still in that phase of chaos, because it is not like a light switch or a snap. But there is something new coming out. Just like the caterpillar is not all of a sudden a butterfly, there is a process in between, very chaotic for the caterpillar, because it gets completely disintegrated before there is anything new. So I think we are going to wrap it up a little bit. So what I like is your big vision. It is not say, oh, I'm against this and against that. No, I have a new system. Let's try that. And not only try it, I tried it already and it works. Add on to it, bring it into practice. So maybe last one thing. So what is the project actually that you are now working? What is the next actual step in your bigger vision that we discussed?
The next physical thing.
Yeah, the next.
10 days ago, the group that we formed 2 years ago, the Gaia and Earth Trust, we were seeking to buy a farm down near Haarlem last year, and 10 days ago, a National Trust property came up for rental, basically, lease. And it's by application, which had to be in last Sunday. And I went and looked, walked around, took hundreds of photographs, sent them off to the other people in the team. We put in an application. They said, if you haven't heard by May the 3rd, which is soon coming, that we're not in. And they rang us up immediately and said, you're in. So it will be interesting to see how that goes. And curiously, it covers a lot of the things that you were suggesting earlier, the kind of the storytelling aspects of this, and bringing one of the first groups we'd want to work with is the village school, and I can build the path between the school and the farm so that they can cycle up, and it's much closer than the other one we were talking about. And because it's 97% wilderness right now, 600 odd acres, and 3% of it, 18 acres, is improved, as they say. Well, that's nothing. But I was saying earlier, Wales can feed itself on 150,000 acres. That's 3% of the agricultural area of Wales. So if Wales can feed itself on 3%, and there's a farm that's up for grabs that is 3% cultivated, 97% wilderness, it's a fascinating example right now of the material that I was writing 4 weeks ago, not knowing this farm was coming up, about the 3% issue. And I think because it's so close to being totally biodiverse, the beauty is to take that 3% and blend it back in so that you start doing agroforestry rather than sheep pasture. And you look at how the flow from river to landscape comes back in terms of the alders that you might plant beside the river. But if you're doing this as an agricultural transition, then it must be an educational transition, so that where you're taking the livestock out of the barns then become an exhibition of what you're doing and why you're doing it, and how little land it takes to feed wells, and how little land it would take in that valley of 455 people to feed the whole of that valley, as it once did. So where do you start the baker, and if so, where do you grow the corn? And all those sorts of things. So because half the length of the farm is bordered by a lake, we're toying with the ideas of growing the willows for coracle construction, so we can make boats on site as a project, or something like that. It doesn't really matter what. And if it's never to be a livestock farm again, but we still need livestock for the upland grass management, then those would be cattle that we're never killing. They're just part of the team that's keeping the landscape in. So they needn't be Welsh blacks, though that would be the first choice. They could be Highland cattle. They could even be Auroch. So it's like, what is the thing that attracts most attention in terms of an educational transformation that says, do you realise what's going on here, or what needs to happen, or how much you could be involved? So we're looking at fresh food, local diet, and so forth, as a storytelling exercise in the land that is richest in myth in this part of the world. Across the lake is Dinas Emrys, where Merlin released the two dragons, and that story has long been interpreted as these dragons fighting each other. If you'd been locked underground for 1,000 years, I think you'd be jumping for joy. But all that activity is the beauty of brother and sister, coming out and entwining. And so to retell the myths, and to do it in a way that retells the industrialization back into cultural integrity and so forth, so that you're reweaving literally from the reeds on the lakeside into baskets, things that say you can do this and you can participate. It's your landscape, and it's empowering to us, it's empowering to them. And I think all that power is actually coming back through the land at the moment. This is another age of Merlin, if you like, and local, rural potential everywhere on earth is going to show the way in which community can be re-empowered, and re-empowered by the reintegration of all those forces that were once separate.
Yeah, I was hesitating. Shall I mention it or not? Some people say that Earth is also a living being. So it could be that this project doesn't came out of nowhere. It is actually meant to be, because it will be a fantastic showcase what you're talking about. And
yes,
I wish you all the best and all of luck for this. And certainly when it is going to happen, I will interview again. Because I'm really interested in the involvement of local people and bring empowerment to them, that we are not victims, we are actually masters of our own environment, outer and inner.
Yes.
So,
as a team, Guy and Earth was set up to look at ways in which we can live on the land permanently. We can't do that on a lease arrangement, but we can establish an education. It's right below Snowdon. The walking path leaves from the gate. So there are thousands of people passing through. So to put something in their lap that says there's more to this landscape than saying, I've done my bucket list, and I've been up Snowdon. But it's really important that comes from the local communities. So I think the essence of that is to enable local people to take over that farm.
Exactly.
So we become the means, and we can then move on. And perhaps get closer to the 1,000 people on 1,000 acres in a permanent community relationship. Which we're that's sitting there for all of us in Guy and Earth. It's one of the things that we're looking at, how we leave it. So we've already brought in 2 local people in our team. It's not just 2 or 3 of us. There are 8 currently who are part of that application. And night before last, I met another who was brought up on a farm and wants to get back to it, who's a local indigenous Welsh-speaking, but you know. So as long as that team works, then people like me can back off. You know, it's lovely. Yes, it's exciting, and it looks like every time we suggest something, another door opens. So it feels like the time is right. Mother Earth, as you say, is saying yes to it. Yeah. And to harmonise with land as well as with people, and to do that in a way that says you can go and do this in your part of the world, would be beautiful.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for this interview, Michael. And I'm already looking forward to the next one. Thanks.
Thank you, Rene.
Yeah.
It's been wonderful. Thank you.